The rain hammered Des Moines that Tuesday morning like it had a personal grudge. I turned 19 in a Denny's booth at 3 a.m., watching truckers nurse coffee and wondering how the hell I'd gotten here. 6 hours earlier, I'd been in my childhood bedroom. Now I own nothing but the clothes on my back and a checking account my parents thought they cleaned out. Funny thing about banks, they keep better records than desperate families do. The waitress kept refilling my coffee cup, probably out of pity. I didn't care. I had nowhere else to go and no money to get there anyway. Mom's voice still echoed in my head from that afternoon. She'd corner me in the kitchen while I was making a sandwich. Birthday, candle stuck in Wonder Bread like some sick joke. Your brother needs his co-signature, she'd said. The bank won't approve him without family backing. It's just a formality. Just $20,000. Just my entire future signed away before I could legally drink. She kept using that word, just like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Like my signature was some meaningless scribble instead of a chain around my neck for the next decade. Dad had been quieter about it. He'd stood in the doorway, not meeting my eyes, explaining how family works, how we take care of each other, how Derek had always struggled and needed this break to start his landscaping business. The same Derek who'd crashed 2 cars, dropped out of community college twice, and once stole my birthday money to buy weed. That Derek needed my signature on a loan I'd be paying for the next decade. Dad kept talking about responsibility, but somehow Derek's responsibility always became mine. That's how it worked in our house. The ultimatum came at dinner. Sign or leave. Those were my choices on my 19th birthday. My cake sat untouched while they explained how ungrateful I was being. How selfish. Derek sat there picking at his food, not saying a word, but his eyes told me everything. He knew this was wrong. He also knew he wasn't going to stop it. Family loyalty only flows one direction in our house, toward Derek. Always toward Derek. I looked at that cake, at their expectant faces, and made my choice. I walked upstairs and started packing. I'd saved every penny from my job at the grocery store. 16 months of stacking cans and dealing with cranky customers, all for the down payment on my first apartment. I had it all planned out: community college in the fall, a studio near campus, finally some breathing room. But when I went to grab my envelope of cash from under my mattress, it was gone. Just gone. My heart stopped. $1,500 in 20s and 50s, earned one shift at a time, vanished. They'd been in my room. They'd taken it while I was at work, probably while planning this whole co-signing ambush. Turns out they'd already spent my savings. Mom admitted it while washing dishes, her back to me, like she was discussing the weather. Derek needed seed money for equipment. They'd pay me back once the business took off. Sure they would. Just like they paid back the graduation money from Grandma or the Christmas cash from Uncle Pete. Some debts just disappear in our family, especially when Derek's involved. I stood there watching her scrub the same plate over and over, understanding that I'd never been a son to them. I'd been a bank account with legs. My car was next. The title was still in Dad's name, a detail I'd never questioned until that moment. He'd already called Jerry's Used Cars. They were picking it up Thursday morning. The money would help with Derek's down payment on a work truck. I stood in the driveway, running my hand over the hood of my beat-up Honda, saying goodbye to the first thing I'd ever called mine. It wasn't much dinted bumper, radio that only played AM stations, air conditioning that worked when it felt like it. But it was mine, or I thought it was. Turns out nothing in that house belonged to me except the debt they wanted me to carry. The 24-hour diner became my office that first night. I sat in the corner booth with a coffee I couldn't afford, using their Wi-Fi to search for rooms to rent. The waitress, a woman named Carol with kind eyes and tired feet, kept refilling my cup without asking for payment. Sometimes strangers show more kindness than family ever will. I learned that lesson at 19, hunched over a laptop in fluorescent lighting. Carol had probably seen plenty of kids like me, desperate, alone, trying to figure out how to survive. She didn't ask questions. She just kept the coffee coming and pretended not to notice when I counted quarters to pay the check. I called the bank first thing Wednesday morning. Turns out my parents had tried to clean out my account, but you need more than just a name to steal someone's money. The teller, bless her, had flagged the transaction. My savings were intact, sitting there waiting for me like a small miracle. $1,500. Not much, but enough to start over. Enough to prove I wasn't completely screwed. I stood in that bank lobby, staring at my balance on the receipt, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. They tried to take everything, but they'd failed. I still had something that was mine, something they couldn't touch. The motel room cost $42 a night. It smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, but it had a roof and a lock that worked. I spread my few belongings across the polyester bedspread and took inventory. 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my laptop, and a wallet with my life savings and cash. Not exactly the empire I'd imagined building, but it was mine. Nobody could take it away. The carpet was stained, the shower barely worked, and I could hear every conversation through the paper-thin walls. But when I turned that deadbolt, I was safe. Nobody had a key. Nobody could walk in and take my stuff while I slept. My phone buzzed constantly those first few days. Mom calling to explain. Dad texting about family obligations. Derek leaving rambling voicemails about how sorry he felt. I listened to the first few, then stopped. Their words were just noise now, the desperate sounds people make when their backup plan walks away. I was done being their safety net, their fallback option, their built-in solution to Derek's problems. Each ignored call felt like freedom. Each deleted voicemail was me choosing myself for the first time in 19 years. They'd trained me to feel guilty for saying no. But guilt fades. Debt doesn't. The job search started immediately. I walked every strip mall and business district in a 5-mile radius, filling out applications and shaking hands with managers who mostly forgot my name before I left. But I was 19, willing to work any shift and desperate enough to smile through anything. That combination opens doors, even when you're living in a motel and wearing the same 3 shirts on rotation. I hit fast food places, retail stores, anywhere with a help wanted sign in the window. Most said they'd call. Most didn't. But I kept walking, kept smiling, kept pretending I wasn't terrified of running out of money before I found work. Pizza Palace hired me on Thursday. Night shift, minimum wage, all the burned cheese and customer complaints I could handle. The manager, a guy named Steve with forearms like tree trunks, took one look at my situation and offered me extra hours. He'd been 19 and homeless once too. Different reasons, same desperation. The solidarity of the desperate is a real thing, and it kept me fed those first weeks. Steve didn't ask questions about why I was living in a motel or why I had no references from previous jobs. He just needed someone who'd show up on time and work hard. I could do that. I've been doing that my whole life, just never for myself. I found my apartment through a Craigslist ad that looked too good to be true. Studio above a hardware store, furnished with someone's grandmother's leftovers. $400 a month, including utilities. The landlord, Mr. Chun, was more interested in reliable rent than credit checks. He looked at my stack of cash, my work uniform, and my determined expression, then handed me the keys. Sometimes desperation looks like responsibility. The place was tiny, basically one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom the size of a closet. But it had windows that let in actual sunlight and a door I could lock from the inside. After 3 weeks in that motel, it felt like a palace. Moving day was a joke. Everything I owned fit in 2 grocery bags and a backpack. No furniture to arrange, no boxes to unpack, no friends to help carry heavy things up narrow stairs. Just me, my few possessions, and a space that was finally completely mine. I sat on the lumpy couch someone had abandoned there and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, peace. Nobody could take this away from me. The previous tenant had left behind a coffee maker that worked sometimes and a TV that only got 3 channels. It was more than I'd had in weeks. I made myself a cup of coffee and watched the evening news, marveling at how quiet it was without Derek's music or Mom's phone calls. The first month was harder than I'd expected. Rent, food, and gas for work ate through my savings faster than I calculated. I lived on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, counted quarters for laundry, and walked everywhere that wasn't work-related. But I was making it. Every day, I didn't call home for help was a small victory. Every night, I fell asleep in my own space was proof I'd made the right choice. I learned to stretch a dollar until it screamed. I learned which dollar store had the best deals and which gas stations had the cheapest prices. I learned that being poor wasn't the worst thing in the world. Being trapped was worse. My family's calls became less frequent as summer turned to fall. First daily, then weekly, then just holidays and birthdays. Mom would leave messages about family dinners I was missing. Dad would text about Derek's business struggles. Apparently, the landscaping company wasn't the gold mine they'd imagined. I felt something like satisfaction hearing about their problems, then immediately felt guilty for feeling satisfied. Growing up means learning your own capacity for pettiness. Derek's business had failed within 2 months. The equipment they'd bought with my savings had been repossessed. The loan payments were killing them. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I made my choice, and they'd made theirs. Community college acceptance came in September. Part-time enrollment, evening classes, financial aid that barely covered tuition. I'd study in a hardware store's break room during slow afternoons, highlighter in hand, textbooks propped against paint cans. Mr. Chan would bring me tea and nod approvingly at my homework. He'd put himself through engineering school, working in his uncle's restaurant. He understood the grind, the exhaustion, the way hope feels heavier than despair sometimes. My first class was Introduction to Business. I sat in the back, surrounded by kids whose parents were paying their way, and felt ancient at 19. But I belonged there. I'd earned my seat. Derek showed up at Pizza Palace on a Tuesday night in October. He looked thinner, older, like responsibility had finally caught up with him. He ordered a small pepperoni and asked if we could talk. I told him we were talking. He explained how the business had failed, how mom and dad were struggling with the loan payments, how everyone missed me. I handed him his pizza and told him that wasn't my problem anymore. He stood there for a moment, holding his pizza box, looking like he wanted to say more. But what was there to say? They'd made their choice on my birthday. I'd made mine by walking away. Some decisions can't be undone with sorry and a pepperoni pizza. The hardest part wasn't the money or the loneliness or the exhaustion. It was learning to trust my own decisions without family input. For 18 years, every choice had been filtered through their opinions, their expectations, their version of what my life should look like. Now I was choosing my classes, my schedule, my future without asking permission. Freedom is terrifying when you're not used to it. It's also addictive. Every choice I made was mine. Every consequence was mine to bear. Every success was mine to celebrate. I was learning what it meant to be responsible for myself instead of responsible for everyone else's mistakes. My first semester grades came back in December. 3 A's and AB+. I stared at that transcript for 10 minutes, understanding for the first time that I was actually smart. Not just helpful, not just reliable, but genuinely intelligent. My family had never seen that in me. I was just the responsible one, the backup plan, the safety net. But I was more than that. I was someone who could build something from nothing. Those grades proved it. I'd worked full-time, lived on ramen, studied by fluorescent light in a hardware store break room, and still pulled a 3.8 GPA. If that wasn't proof I could make it on my own, nothing was. Christmas was the test. Mom called, crying, begging me to come home for the holidays. Derek had moved back into his old room. Dad was working double shifts to cover the loan payments. The family was falling apart without me there to hold things together. I listened to her sob into the phone and felt my resolve waver. Then I remember my birthday, the ultimatum, the way they'd stolen my money without asking. I hung up and made myself a grilled cheese sandwich. Christmas morning, I worked a double shift at Pizza Palace, delivering food to families celebrating together. It was the loneliest day of my life. It was also the first Christmas that was entirely mine. New Year's Eve found me working a double shift, delivering pizzas to people celebrating with friends and family. I drove through neighborhoods I'd grown up near, past houses where normal families were probably watching ball drops and making resolutions. I felt a stab of loneliness, so sharp it almost doubled me over. But then I thought about my transcript, my apartment key, my bank account that nobody else could touch. Loneliness is temporary. Self-respect is forever. I delivered my last pizza at 11:47 p.m., drove back to my apartment, and watched the ball drop on my scratchy TV. At midnight, I was alone, but I was free. Spring semester brought new challenges and new confidence. I'd figured out the rhythm of work and school, found study groups with other non-traditional students, started to imagine a future that looked nothing like the life my family had planned for me. I was thinking about transferring to a 4-year school, maybe studying business or accounting. Numbers made sense. Numbers didn't lie or steal or manipulate. I could build a career on numbers, create a life where everything added up correctly, where assets and liabilities balanced out, where you couldn't spend money you didn't have or make promises you couldn't keep. The phone call came on a Tuesday in March. Dad had had a heart attack, not fatal, but serious enough for the emergency room and overnight observation. Mom was asking all of us kids to come to the hospital. All of us kids. Like I was still part of that unit, still available for family emergencies despite being cut off for refusing to bankroll Derek's dreams. I stared at the phone for 20 minutes, then texted back that I hoped he felt better soon. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't drop everything to rush to his bedside. I finished my shift at Pizza Palace and went home to study for a midterm exam. Sometimes being family means more than sharing DNA. Derek showed up at my apartment that night. He'd gotten my address from my old boss at the grocery store, had driven across town to guilt me in person. He stood in my doorway, explaining how I was tearing the family apart, how my stubbornness was killing Dad, how I needed to be the bigger person. I looked at him, 21 years old and still living at home, still expecting other people to solve his problems, and felt nothing but pity. He was still the same person who'd sat silent while they demanded my signature. Still the same person who'd let them steal my savings. Still the same person who thought family meant everyone else cleaning up his messes. I did visit Dad in the hospital, but on my terms. I went alone, during visiting hours, with flowers I'd bought with my own money. He looked smaller in that hospital bed, older and more fragile than I remembered. We talked about his recovery, about work, about everything except the loan or Derek or why I'd been gone for 8 months. When I left, he squeezed my hand and said he was proud of me. It was the first time he'd ever said those words. I think he finally understood that I wasn't coming back, that I'd built something without them, despite them, that maybe they'd been wrong about me all along. My second year of college started that fall. I'd saved enough for a better apartment, a used car, and books that weren't held together with duct tape. I was majoring in accounting now, had an internship lined up for the summer, could see a path forward that led somewhere real. My family still called occasionally, still tried to pull me back into their orbit of crisis and drama. But I had my own gravity now, my own priorities, my own problems to solve. The difference was my problems were actually solvable because I wasn't constantly fixing everyone else's mistakes. Progress is possible when you're not running in place. I'm 23 now, working at a small accounting firm and finishing my bachelor's degree at night. I have an emergency fund, a retirement account, and a credit score that would make my 19-year-old self weep with joy. My family sends Christmas cards and birthday texts, maintaining the fiction that we're all still close. Derek's married now, working for someone else's landscaping company, paying off that loan in small monthly installments. Sometimes I wonder if they tell people I'm away at college or working out of state. Anything to avoid explaining why their son doesn't come home for holidays. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd signed that paper, stayed in my childhood bedroom, remained their backup plan. I'd probably be broke, resentful, and still fixing Derek's mistakes. Instead, I'm sitting in my own apartment, looking at job offers from firms in Chicago and Denver, planning a future that belongs entirely to me. The rain is hitting Des Moines again tonight, but this time I'm not running from anything. I'm just getting started. 4 years ago, I had nothing but the clothes on my back and $1,500 in a checking account. Now I have something nobody can take away. The knowledge that I can survive anything, build anything, become anything I choose to be.